Gentleman yields back. Chair recognizes Mr. Crenshaw for 5 minutes on the underlying bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move to strike the last word.
Gentleman's recognized for 5 minutes. Strike the last word.
All right, so this is the third time that we've discussed this. Our first time was during a hearing where the Democrat witness said that the evidence for the benefits of these kind of transitions, these affirmation transition surgeries and treatments, she said, quote, standards of care. Of course, that's a meaningless term if you don't have evidence to back why you created those standards in the first place. In the last hearing in the subcommittee, I was happy to hear at least a couple of studies cited that would confirm that position. Of course, I have the rebuttals to every single one of those studies. I've noticed that there's no more science being talked about. I've heard it explicitly said that they don't want to discuss the science, but we actually have to discuss the science. And when you establish standards of care, you have to do so through what is called systematic reviews. When you look at evidence-based medicine, systematic reviews are at the top of the hierarchy because it takes into account the way that these studies are done. It takes into account whether they're randomized, whether they're controlled, whether there's placebo effects, all of it. It takes that all into account, then it establishes those standards of care. And in every single systematic review, all 5 that have been done, they find little to no evidence that there's any benefit of this whatsoever. Now, that wouldn't matter so much if there weren't so much risk. But there is a lot of risk. There's a ton of risk when you give a 12-year-old puberty blockers, which 98% of which, by the way, move on to hormone therapy because those puberty blockers are like a gateway, and then on to surgical interventions. Telling me there's no risk there? There's a ton of risk. That doesn't even need to be debated. And if you're gonna do something that carries with it a lot of risk, then you might wanna really be sure about the benefits. I keep hearing that suicide, that this will prevent suicides. Zero evidence for that. There's not one systematic review that says that. Now, say the president of the Endocrine Society says it's true, but studies published by the Endocrine Society say there's no evidence to suggest that there's a causal relationship between less suicides and these kind of therapies. These facts matter quite a bit. It also matters quite a bit when you think about the fact that 70% of US teens who present to gender clinics already have comorbid psychiatric diagnoses that precede the onset of gender issues. That fact really matters when we're trying to ascertain what is causing what. I've been called cruel and indecent for promoting this legislation. That's insane. It's been said that Gerald Ford would never support this, would roll over at his grave as he looks at these terrible Republicans saying that 12-year-old girls shouldn't have double mastectomies or that little boys shouldn't be castrated. Yeah. Are we really the ones who have changed so much? I mean, really? I don't think so. I'll tell you what, back when Gerald Ford was president, there was no Democrats advocating for this kind of thing. This is a social contagion that has occurred just in the last 15 years. I don't think any of you believed in this before 15 years ago. This all happened very recently. This is a social contagion. It is a trend that has captured the imagination of some of our most prestigious society and the leaders of those societies, even though the evidence so clearly does not back it up. No, I don't like the fact that we have to do this through the GME funding. But tell you what, we are going to fund the GME program, just like everybody's worried about, we are going to fund it. And we're also going to say that when those residents get trained, they're going to be trained the correct way based on actual evidence-based medicine, not pseudoscience that is based on some social contagion trend. We've put a lot of evidence forward. I'll take on anybody who wants to talk about the studies or the systematic reviews. We'll talk about, actually, just after our last subcommittee hearing, Wall Street Journal published a letter from 21 leading pediatricians around the world talking about how this has to stop. They've stopped it in European countries. They've stopped it everywhere except here. The Dutch model that everybody likes to look to that says, look, this proves it works, the Dutch model, the Dutch will say their model is not the American affirmation model. There are doctors in America who say, look, we don't even ask questions. The child comes and presents as trans. We absolutely give them puberty blockers and hormone therapy. We put them on that path that you cannot come back from. You're going to say that's good science, that's good medicine? That's not good medicine. We have to press the pause button. That's all this bill is advocating for. In fact, all it does is remove taxpayer money from doing it when 70% of taxpayers don't agree that puberty blockers should be used on minors. That's all it does, and I yield back. Thank you.
Gentleman yields back. Chair recognizes Ranking Member Mr. Plum for 5 minutes.